Bree Speaks, Episode 1, CPR. Welcome back to Bree Speaks. Well, today I decided to name my episode CPR. Some may ask why. Well, we done went through a lot this year and last year too, dealing with COVID, racial injustice, the switch of political power. I believe as Americans as a whole, we all need CPR. We need to be revived and purged from the events we've seen and thoughts we've heard out loud. We need to start all over. We need someone to give us life again. This life that we've been living hasn't been the right idea. We need to learn how to love again, learn how to live, how to spread joy and happiness, how to treat others how we want to be treated. And in this podcast, I'm going to get down to the nitty-gritty of why we aren't living like that anymore. And the biggest elephant in the room is now, we all know the biggest elephant in the room is COVID. Now, I posted a poll to my social media asking what's the biggest takeaway from living this year and 2020 with COVID still being around and still being centered of our lives. And here were some responses I received. From one of my most dearest followers, my sister, she said, always have a backup plan. Your job doesn't always guarantee you stability. Now let's speak on that. This pandemic has showed us how certain companies don't really care about your health and well-being as others would and as you thought they would. This pandemic has also showed you how some companies have to keep businesses running. And in order for them to keep the business running, they got to have employees. So I think what that takeaway is real important because it's a pandemic. And most of us been working the whole entire pandemic. Another one of my followers did say, health equals wealth. Now that little term means so much during this pandemic. I mean, if you get corona, you're out of work for 2 weeks or more. That means you're out of money for 2 weeks or more. So when you start taking care of your body and going to weekly visits and making sure that you're good, you make more money. I completely agree with this aspect, and I never really thought about it like that. Thank you, Zion, for opening our eyes. Another one of my followers, whose name chooses not to be disclosed, said, even in a pandemic, there's money to be made. And I agree. Think about all the grocery store jobs. Grocery stores been open since the pandemic started. They never closed. There's certain jobs that had to stay running. And since they stay running, they needed more workers. So you can always make money if you really wanted to. It's all about your ambition and your hustle to make that money. The last response that I'm going to single out is people are truly inconsiderate. Now, this is a big one, and this is one that's been on my mind for a minute. I'm glad that somebody highlighted that because Corona has showed me how people will know about something and know that it can harm others and still not letting others aware. For example, say you have COVID and you know the first thing they tell you to do is go warn everybody and tell them to get tested. If you choose to keep this to yourself and still go out and be in social with other people and still going out day to day without wearing a mask, without really caring to let people know your status and let people know what you have at the moment, you are truly an inconsiderate person because there are people who are dying from this, a lot of them. And why would you ever want to make someone sick, especially someone who is close to you or someone who's your friend or family? That is truly inconsiderate. I believe we can all say this pandemic has brought out the good, the bad, and the ugly out of people and out of situations. But we as Americans, we as the United States, as the people, we just as in our culture, we have truly tried to see the bright side of things. Businesses have bloomed during the pandemic. People have been getting money. People are starting schools, taking on new hobbies. That's just the important thing in life. You got to see the good side out of the bad, I believe. But now on to a more depressing topic. We're going to speak about racial injustice. I mean, we've all seen the tabloids, the headlines. We even have a couple of situations where it's really personal, close to home, that we know of. And we all know it's not right. It's not right at all. You should never be sought after because of your race, or you should never be deemed as a stereotype because of your color of your skin. We're all humans at the end of the day, but some people just don't get that aspect. And of course, since this is my podcast, I'm going to give you guys my opinion on the aspect. I believe everything that happened that day to Mr. Floyd was based off of racism. Yes, I said it, racism. Why I say racism and not prejudice is because he felt as though he was superior to take that man's life. Derek Chauvin felt like he had the audacity. He could take his life without any consequences. He thought he was in the right. You can't do that just because someone is African American or because someone is Asian or Hispanic. Those things do not allow you to feel superior over someone. You should never feel superior over anyone, because at the end of the day, I believe we are all God's human beings. We're all God's children, and we're all equal. Equality. What a beautiful word. Viewers, don't you think equality is a beautiful word? I also like the word diversity. Diversity is a great word as well. What are some words that you really like or that you think brings happiness and joy to a sentence? Drop it down below. We can discuss it in the next podcast. Now, let's discuss another aspect that was racially unjust. What happened a couple months ago? I don't even think it was a couple months ago. I think it's a couple weeks. What happened with in Georgia with the nail shop? When the boy thought he had the right to go into the Asian nail shop and shoot the workers. When I heard it, I was outraged. And my biggest thought was, and it's so sad to say, I kind of already knew what the suspect looked like. And when you think about it, you just start to think in these aspects of life. So when you see the common denominators, you just think, to me, why aren't y'all changing the way y'all are thinking? Then I had read somewhere. Well, let me pull it up for you. Okay, guys, I'm back with the proof. So it was NBC, and they decided to tell African Americans how they should be allies to the Asian community. Now, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with us being allies to the Asian community. I already feel as though we are allies to the Asian community. But how come African Americans are being brought into this talk? We are not the denominator. We're not the problem. We can be allies, but I think you should also make do the same thing on how the Caucasian community can be allies to African Americans and the Asian community. Let's talk about the bigger picture. How everyone could be allies to everyone if we just all treat everybody with respect and decency. Bigger picture. Let's talk about why are we single-handedly singling out African Americans to help the Asian community when African Americans are still trying to help the African American community. We're still not receiving the justice that we should be seeing. That's a big note that I believe they should take away from that. Why do you bring African Americans into problems that we didn't start and that we didn't cause? Who knows? Maybe I'm just passionate. What do you guys think? Y'all believe that? Don't you believe everybody should be decent human beings and we should all just come together? I know it's kind of sounds like a make-believe idea, but I think that's something that can actually happen in the world. Hopefully in the future. On a lighter note, let's discuss the switching of powers. I mean, we've all seen it firsthand. And We seen when Trump won over Hillary. Some people were confused. Some people knew it was going to happen. Some people were just like, that's life. But then when Biden comes on and he decides that he's going to be running with the first black vice president, the crowd went wow. I mean, it's a nice step because we did have the first black African American president not too long ago, and that was great to see. But now to see a woman of color in power, it just makes me want to power and want to drive myself to do better, to do more. What about you guys? Do you feel the same? I think when I seen her first picture, I just seen someone who looks like my cousin, my auntie, someone who could be me in the future. It just made me think like you can do anything. And she's proving to us that we can be what we want to be. There's no standards. There's no guidelines. We don't have to pass a color or have to talk a certain way. We can be ourselves and be true to us and still have power and still motivate everyone else and still get the job done. Because at the end of the day, all it's about is getting the job done and getting it done right. And that's what I believe in the most. Now, I'm not going to get into all of the politics because they did promise a lot of things. And I see them coming through with some, and some are still, on the way. But maybe another podcast can all be about political powers and what we need in the future. Free healthcare, free schooling, all that. And when I say free healthcare and free schooling, I don't mean only free healthcare and free schooling for people who make the basic minimum. Because people who are in middle class need the same things as well. School is expensive. Healthcare is expensive. But those are things we should have and we shouldn't go without. Now, to close out for today, I do have a question to ask y'all. What do you believe the people who do these racial injustices should get? What do they deserve for their punishment? Because if you ask me, I believe they're just getting off way too easy. I believe if you incite punishment, it stops it from happening again. If the punishment is too light, people believe that they can take that punishment and keep going. If you make a harder punishment, nobody will be a copycat. Nobody will do this again. We got to do something, right, guys? Well, viewers, this has been a great chit chat. Tune back in next week to Bree Speaks, and we'll talk some more.